Please help me welcome in.
Thank you.
All right.
I want to bring an interesting story to you. Hopefully everyone sees it that way. How the trade might promote humanitarian and religious freedoms in Cuba. And I want to ask you a question. How many of you think that just trade can impact another country in what they believe or how they run their government?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Well, thank you. That's a good compliment there. I want to go through three topics to cover to try to make my point on this. First, Cubans are an oppressed society as we see today. Second, the Cuban hope for humanitarian religious freedom is at a low point. And third, the individual human contact through trade can promote change in their freedoms. And the way I like to go about explaining this is on my first topic, Cubans are an oppressed society as seen today. I had the good fortune to have made a couple of trade team trips to Cuba in the last 5 years. And you get a bird's eye view of what that country is like and how the Castro regime has oppressed their population. On my first evening, on the first trip that I made, we did a downtown tour of Havana. The first impression came to my mind as a crumbling city. The old homes and buildings and businesses in downtown Havana just literally, because of lack of maintenance, just are crumbling. And then from there, we... And then too, when you get into looking at lost my train of thought here. I'm sorry.
That's okay. So let's move on to point number 2 then. Just read it.
All right. Then secondly, the Cuban hope for humanitarian and religious freedom is at a low point. To try to explain what I'm trying to say here is we had the opportunity on our second trade team trip. Havana is divided up in multiple areas. You have Havana as a whole, but you got Old Town Havana goes back for centuries. There's shops, there is some tourism. Canada is their major tourist, but we had the opportunity because of the type of trade mission we were on to also tour and get to meet the population. And the story I'd like to tell is about an individual that we met on the streets of Old Havana. We were a group going to buy cigars to bring back home. And this fella here, he was trying to intercept us going to a place to buy cigars. Average Cuban is highly educated. Cuba as a whole and their education system, they're number one in Latin American countries as far as the scale of education. There's other things that the Cuban population benefit from that they see they benefit from in their governmental structure is that they have a subsidized food system and then a fully free medical system. Right. But this young man, even though with all of these things that they apparently seem to want to hang on to, he was still without hope. Here he was, a college graduate, and the career path that he gained out of that education, he wasn't even using it. He saw that he could make more money by intercepting that trade mechanism that we as tourists were trying to engage in and to buy those cigars. And to discuss with him hope and change in their government and their policies, he had no hope whatsoever. Right, sure. So that leads to me to this third point. Individual human contact through trade promote change in their freedoms. When you travel Cuba, you don't see much evidence of religious practice at all. And also, the people themselves do have interest to make change. And to give you an example of a person that we encountered as we were traveling Cuba to a collective farm that they had in their country, our tour guide that was provided to us for the entire 2-day stay, we visited with her about things that she had that we didn't see the other Cubans had. One of the friends of mine that was on the bus, he quizzed her about, let me back up and state that she was a 43-year-old young woman. Her name was Adalmi. She had a college education in English. She was looking at a career to be an English teacher or translator in their government. When she got out of college, she became a translator in governmental meetings, just like we were with the government officials as a part of our trip. And she asked after about doing this for about 7 to 10 years, she asked for a career change. Her supervisor said, "No, this will be what you'll be doing the rest of your life." She didn't like that. I don't know the story of the transition from being an interpreter with the government, but she became a tour guide for a Cuban tour company that we were engaged with.
Sure.
And this friend of mine on the bus, he said, "Hey, Dalmy, I noticed you have a cell phone, but when we traveled and toured downtown Havana the first evening, we didn't see people walking on the street that had cell phones. How can you afford one?" "Well, you tourists give us good tips at the end of these trips."
Sure.
"Oh, okay." Well, he didn't stop there. He said, "Would you go back to work for the government?" "Well, of course not. The pay's too good with what I'm doing now." He said, "Do you realize that's capitalism?" Her face dropped just a blank look. She had never thought about the concept of what she was doing was capitalistic in nature.
Right.
She turned face forward in the bus for a few minutes and turned around and acknowledged that, yeah, he was right. He said, "Well, most families in Cuba live with multi-generational." So he said, "Go back and visit with your parents tonight and your husband, and let's talk about this capitalism a little bit. And I want to visit with you some more tomorrow when we leave." Well, when we left, before going through customs, I visited with. I knew he had visited with her a little bit about it, but I had my own way of interest of trying to visit with about what she may have learning that term capitalism. I handed her my business card. I said, "Dalmy, the purpose of this business card is the email address on here." I said, "When you and your family decide you want to defect to Miami, I want a message to let me know, and I'll have a delegation to meet you there." She threw up her hands looking up at me, and she said, No. This is my home." I said, "You made my point. My point is that you have a desire of change of government. You have a desire to be treated humanitarianly wise differently. You have a desire to exercise religious freedoms. The only way you're going to have permanent change in your country is you promote that. And hopefully you don't become a prison for doing this, but at least try to do it some way privately and instill in your comrades hope, as that individual that I described earlier did not have." And through that's the insight that I wanted to bring into this with these 3 points here. That the Cubans are an oppressed society as we see them today. They have a postal system that doesn't function, and they haven't communicated even among themselves in over 50 years. The Cuban hope for humanitarian and religious freedom is a low point. The example I gave you with the young man on the streets of Havana, college education, but he found another way just to try to make a life in a world of oppression. An individual human contact through trade can promote change in their freedoms. We can try to force that change, and we got examples in our own history trying to do that with other countries unsuccessfully. But with all these concepts here, I think trade is a method that we can really change the destiny of a country that's so close to us.
Give him a hand. All right.